There are two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. That was said by Robert S. Mueller III, former director of the FBI. Earlier this month, T-Mobile discovered that a malicious actor gained access to their systems in November last year and stole personal information from 37 million customers. A few weeks ago, MailChimp, the email marketing platform, alerted customers that they had suffered a data breach due to the social engineering attack. That's their first for 2023 and the third in the last 9 months. Norton LifeLock sent a notice to their customers in mid-January that over 6,000 of their customers' accounts had been breached in recent weeks due to a stuffing attack. December 2022, Uber announced that a hacker had gained access to 70,000 plus Uber employees' data and was posting stolen corporate data. They believe the breach occurred because of a third-party vendor. Health insurance Medibank revealed in October 2022 that almost 4 million of their customers' data had been exposed to the hacker. In the third quarter of 2022, 1 out of every 42 healthcare organizations was the victim of a ransomware attack. And in August, a data breach into Plex, a media server app used by millions, resulted in personal encrypted data of their customers being compromised. Welcome everyone to our panel discussion on the topic of cybersecurity. We have a distinguished group of hard-hitting experts with us today who will be sharing their unique insights and experiences on the challenges and opportunities in the field of cybersecurity. I am Ajmal Nazir, your moderator for this panel. I have extensive in-depth knowledge of network and the web application level security and a holder of CISSP. I'm here to learn from our panelists. Cybersecurity has become one of the most pressing issues in today's digital age. With the increasing reliance on technology in all aspects of our lives, we need for robust cybersecurity measures has never been greater. Hackers and cyber criminals are constantly finding new ways to exploit vulnerabilities in our systems, putting individuals, businesses, and governments at risk. However, cybersecurity is not just about protecting against threats, it's also about innovation and development. As technology continues to advance, so too do the ways in which we can protect ourselves and our data. This panel will explore the development in cybersecurity, including technologies and best practices for staying safe online. Our panelists come from a variety of backgrounds, including government, private industry, and academia. They bring a wealth of experience and knowledge to the table, and we are honored to have them here today with us. First, we have Vincent Stewart, who is the director of CyberEye. Vincent has extensive experience in nation-state level security, having worked for the US government, and will be providing insights from his unique perspective. Next, we have Ricardo Martinez, who is the Chief Revenue Officer at DigitalEra Group. Ricardo worked at McAfee for an extensive period, due to which he has background in malware attacks, probably the biggest single area of attack vectors. Panelist number 3 is Anthony Peyson, who is the president of the International Information Systems Security Certification Consortium's Caribbean chapter, aka ISC Squared Caribbean chapter. The warders of CISSP, arguably considered the gold standard for cybersecurity governance certification. And then finally, we have Emmanuel Oscar from Fortinet, an international and widely known security solution provider. Emmanuel is the Caribbean Systems Engineer Manager, and we'd like to give a special thanks to Emmanuel because I know he was traveling and was up till I think about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when he sent his last email to me. So thank you for the panelists and welcome to this panel. We'll be starting the panel with a brief overview from each of our panelists, followed by a moderated discussion, and finally a Q&A session. So feel free to put your comments and questions into the chats. We want to make this interactive and answer questions that you have. We encourage everyone to participate and engage with our panelists, as this is a great opportunity to learn from some of the most experienced experts in the field. So with further ado, I'm going to start introducing the panelists, and I would like each panelist to give us a brief on their experience and answer the first question, just go into the first question, which is, as experts in the field of cybersecurity, can each of the panelists briefly introduce themselves and discuss their experience in addressing and mitigating cybersecurity risks in small, developing countries with limited infrastructure in place. And I would like to start with Vincent Stewart.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I discovered this morning as I tried to set my background that I may know about cybersecurity, but I don't know how the heck to do a background, but that's a whole nother story. So I am a 38-year intelligence officer for the United States Marine Corps. I retired about 4 years ago, but spent most of my career doing signals intelligence and the last 12 years or so in the cybersecurity space. When I retired, I was second in command at U.S. Cyber Command, the organization we built to defend and counter threats in cyberspace. Prior to that, I was the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, who provides analytic support to a wide array of customers, from the President of the United States all the way down to the men and women in combat formations. My experience with cybersecurity began around 2009, when a nation state penetrated one of our most sensitive networks, and we had to get inside the network, understand what the adversary was up to, mitigate the threat in the network, and get back up and running across the secure network. I then had an opportunity to help design the concept for how the United States would defend its most critical networks, and then had the opportunity to build the teams that would implement the concept. So the last 12 years, like I said, designing the concept, building the teams, implementing the concept, fighting those teams, actually using them in operations, and had the opportunity to learn how an adversary, and that adversary ranges from nation state to criminals to hacktivists to just people who want to make your life miserable. And so I spent, like I said, the last 12 years doing that. Since I retired, I do a number of consulting support. I sit on a number of boards to include CyberEye board there in Trinidad and Tobago. And I try to help folks in the C-suite understand their role in defending the networks. And I have a tendency to say a very simple phrase to our corporate civilian sectors: the cavalry is not coming. So it doesn't matter how big or small you are. The adversary is interested in your networks, and you have to think your way through how you're going to defend that networks against a determined adversary. And for a country, I hate to use the word small, but a small country like Trinidad and Tobago, it may be very easy to say that nation states or hacktivists or criminals are not interested, but they are interested. And so the things that you can do as a government at the corporate level to effectively defend, and we'll talk about some of this as we go along, is absolutely critical, because the government will not have enough capacity to come to your assistance. And I'll stop there, so leave plenty of time for the discussion.
Thank you for that, Vincent. And I wonder if the FBI or the CIA are monitoring this panel. Make sure you don't say anything classified.
No, I'm pretty sure I won't say anything classified. Most of what we need to know and discuss is, quite frankly, open, publicly available, and easily shareable. So I think I'll be okay.
Right. Okay. Right. And Ricardo, would you like to jump in next?
Absolutely. And good morning, everybody. And it's an honor to be here. A very interesting story on Vincent's side. A lot of experience there. So my introduction to cybersecurity, I had started my own independent ISP back in the late 90s in Dominican Republic. And as an ISP, obviously the connectivity, and I had a group of really young hackers that were part of my tech team. and they were monitoring, seeing the traffic that was going on, and it was just eye-opening. The number of attacks back then, and we were using open source tools because there weren't really a lot of security tools back there to utilize. There was Nessus to scan for vulnerabilities. There was Snort to kind of understand the traffic and what was going on. And it was just eye-opening that back in those days, when there was not a lot of people with internet, that we were getting inundated with attacks. And that's just propagated over the years. And now it's gotten more advanced. And originally the script kiddies or the just people that were interested in seeing what they could do. Now it's just organized crime really trying to affect organizations and try to get a benefit out of it. So they're actually getting monetary benefit from these cyber attacks, where before it was just kind of an honor to, or just their own ego was boosted when they said I hacked or I attacked some organization. Today, it's actually, I got money in the bank and now I have my cryptocurrency and I can go buy a Ferrari with it. And so this is a very different kind of motivation that these adversaries have. So my experience, you mentioned, I worked in McAfee, so that transitioned me into kind of being very much interested in the cybersecurity world. And I joined McAfee in 2003, kind of building out the Caribbean for McAfee because there was a lot of need. There was things that were surging, a lot of organizations that were needing cybersecurity tools. In the early days, there was only around 3 or 4 companies that were focused on this area. So we were actually able to support and kind of mark our place in the market by providing technology that would help uncover. But we've seen over the past 20 years, really hasn't gotten much better. I mean, we have been mitigating events and attacks, the simple things, but adversaries have the motivation to continue to move on. They just have to be right once. We have to be right every single time. So that's my introduction. And I know there's a lot of other interesting things that we're going to be sharing today. So looking forward to this.
Thank you for that, Ricardo. And Emmanuel, are you awake?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Always. Whenever there's a good conversation about cybersecurity, I'm definitely going to be awake.
Excellent. So over to you.
Yeah, so great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here among the esteemed panelists and our guests. So like Vincent, I served in the United States Army, and I was a nuclear and biological warfare specialist. So this is where I got my start overall in security. And it took me some years later to eventually transition into cybersecurity. I have a need, to further extend my security experience. I think the key thing that I see that's happening is we transform and we move into different areas as we grow. We're always going to increase what we normally call the threat landscape. And that's always increasing. And as we increase and we innovate, it's going to introduce risks. And these risks are going to bring different opportunities for the threat actors to take advantage of the situation, condition, the environment, however it may be. So what I do, moving some years later, I joined Fortinet. I have 14 years with the company. Some of the things that we do, especially, and I do agree with Vincent, the fact that whether you're large or small does not matter, because the idea is you follow where the money is. Wherever you can get the money, that's where you go. And the easier, the better. And sometimes being smaller, you may say, well, I have less, but it does not matter. So what we do is in the Caribbean, having managed a cybersecurity team where I have 4 engineers in Trinidad, 5 engineers in Dominican Republic, 4 in Puerto Rico, and also supporting and 2 in Jamaica as well. And this is a collaborative effort. And we have to share in doing cybersecurity in a silo is not the cybersecurity at all. So what we do, we partner with different governments in the Caribbean to help sharing of that information. We do heavy research on the dark web through our what we have is our FortiGuard labs. We help disseminate information to help them understand the threat that different governments, different countries in the Caribbean are facing. And we do this on a global nature, but since my area of expertise is the Caribbean, that's where I will focus. And also what we do is, as we see the different types of ransomware attack, we understand state versus state, but also we understand the need for critical infrastructure protection. Lots of the time, many countries in the Caribbean, we don't do as much as we should to help protect our critical infrastructure. And at the end, we end up, we pay a significant price for that lack of control and visibility that they may not have. So really to help countries, foster a cybersecurity, a solid, resilient cybersecurity program. We help disseminate the information, help them protect. Also, we collaborate with different governments in the Caribbean, and also we offer. We partner in terms of when something does happen, because you don't want to wait when there's a disaster to find out, hey, where's Emmanuel's phone number to reach out to me to help out, especially when it comes to incident response and so on. So really, from a Fortinet perspective, who I represent, and that's how we help countries in the Caribbean help mitigate the risk that cybersecurity and threat actors expose different countries to.
Thank you very much for that. And finally, Anthony, over to you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And I'd like to thank Ajmal and the rest of the TTGF team for inviting me to this esteemed panel and discussion. So my name is Anthony Peyson. I have 25 years of experience in information technology. 15 of those years have been in cybersecurity. I worked for Petrotrin, TSTT. It was in TSTT that I branched off into cybersecurity, and that was a long time ago, probably like around 2007, 2008, around that time. At that time, cybersecurity was a relatively new field, and we at TSTT, just like Ricardo, we understood what the threat looked like, because we were able as an ISP to see some of the dangerous traffic that was coming into Trinidad and Tobago. And at that time, there was very little control that we had over that information that was coming in terms of legislation and expertise within the country, within the local sphere, to actually treat with some of that dangerous bits of information that was coming through into the local environment. So we knew that we had to protect our customers. So, we developed certain controls that were put in place to try and protect some of our customers. But it was a learning experience, and it took a number of years, long hours in the boiler room, in the engine room, working and trying to perfect some of the techniques that we learned while we were being trained and while we were being outfitted to protect our customers. So with the experience that I gained, it was across the entire cybersecurity spectrum, from auditing, go straight across to security application development. So my perspective is a wide one. And at this point in time in my career, I am more of, my passion is in the line of mentoring those upcoming cybersecurity professionals. So hence the reason why I took upon a project, and this project was to start an ISC squared Caribbean chapter, and this Caribbean chapter is a chapter that will be a regional chapter that will cover the entire Caribbean, all the island states of the Caribbean, as well as some of the South American states that are part of, like CARICOM. So we are looking at Guyana, Suriname, even Venezuela, and then we have Cuba. So it's going to be, we expect it to be a huge organization, and we expect it to be very impactful. So what we want to do as one of our main goals within this organization is to develop the cybersecurity capacity within the region, so that we would not have to go very far in looking for resources to help us create and build and conceptualize and support business infrastructure, government infrastructure as our economies grow and diversify. Everything is going into the direction of information technology. Therefore, you need to have that layer of security to protect your information assets. So that is one of my passions, among others, and you'll be hearing a bit more about it during this session that we have here. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So now we know who everyone is, and we've got a brief introduction. That's the easy part done. So we're going to dive into some more tougher questions and start getting in deeper. My second question, I'm going to sort of align it with the questions that's been posted in the chat, which is that the UK Royal Mail suffered a ransomware attack a couple of weeks ago. There seems to be a trend that the delivery organizations have been targets in recent times, especially since COVID came and there's been an explosion of logistic companies. What do panelists recommend under resourced postal operators in the SIDS, the small island development states like Trinidad and Tobago, do better to prepare themselves? And along with that, to deal with the issue of the postal service, over the past couple of years, there's been a few high-profile security breaches in very large private companies and public institutions in Trinidad and Tobago. Do you think the incidents were handled correctly and have lessons been learned? What role does our government have beyond the enactment of the Data Privacy Act? And I'd like to open with Ricardo.
Sure, thank you. And yeah, so the question around, I guess, the parcels and I mean, the supply chain, which has been a big issue since COVID, obviously they are going to be targets, and every organization is not exempt from being targeted. I think one of the key aspects of having or being prepared for these types of events is obviously having contingencies. If everything has now been digitized, the idea is that we're transitioning to digitalization. So you have to have an incident response plan. There's kind of the basic hygiene things that have to be addressed. And I think that's probably where the deficiency is. A lot of organizations just think cybersecurity is putting a tool in. I'm putting a firewall, putting an antivirus, I should be good to go. And it's kind of just putting a Band-Aid on a very big, so you kind of have to address it from the core. And I think the processes and the policies have to be established. That's what happened in Costa Rica. They didn't have an incident response plan, and if they didn't have a very good one. So being able to react to the event quickly is crucial. And as you mentioned, in these recent attacks that we've seen from private institutions in Trinidad and in the region, obviously they weren't prepared to handle it. That's why it became such big news, because their operations actually they stopped operating. And obviously that gave a lot of visibility. Have you had contingencies, or you were prepared? Because a lot of times in the incident response, you even have public relations as part of that plan. Is how do I communicate to the public? What do I say? In the case of like Costa Rica, when they got it breached, the president came out and said, we are handling it, everything's fine. everything's under control. Then 2 days later, he declared a state of emergency. So being able to respond accurately, concisely, and actually be able to have the contingencies in place to mitigate against threats is crucial. And I think in those times, and were they handled correctly, I think they handled it in the best way that they could have been. I don't think that necessarily there was any ill intent, but they weren't prepared. That's obvious by the size of the incident and the time that they were down. So I'll let the rest of the panelists to continue the conversation forward.
Right, thank you for that. And the same question out to Vincent.
So Ricardo hit probably I'll say this carefully, the back end. Do you have a plan in your organization to deal with when that event occurs? Do you know what you're going to do in the first 10 minutes? What are you going to do in the next hour? Who has authorities to act to defend your network? What tools are in place? What's your strategic communication plan? So that's on the one end when there is an incident. The issue I've seen in organizations, and the target range is wide. It's schools, it's hospitals, it's large corporations, it's everything in between. But there's some very basic things that organizations can do no matter how much resources they have. They've got to know what their network configuration looks like. They've got to have updated operating system. They've got to have an antivirus malware protection capability. They've got to educate their workforce. They've got to not be lazy about passwords. It is stunning to me, organizations that I go into, and the password is password. And some of them get really clever and they do uppercase P and they add 1, 2, 3, 4 on the back end, and they think that that's sufficient. But those are very basic things that we can all do in our private lives and in our corporations to at least give us a modicum of defense. If I'm an adversary, I'm going to get you. If I'm determined, I will get you. But if you're not doing passwords and operating system update and configuration controls and just some basic stuff, then you're just going, hit me. I would love to be a target. So on the one level, you can do some very basic best practice. And on the other end, when it happens, how will you deal with it? And unfortunately, a lot of corporations are not thinking about either end of that spectrum. And I'll stop there.
Right, thank you for that. Emmanuel, what's your perspective on it?
Yeah, no, thank you. So I'd like to continue where Vincent left off. So when we look at what corporations, and again, this is where I usually bring in my experience being within having kind of the military background, being able to respond and incident, respond, contain, and eradicate, right? So when you look at a private sector or even certain government, seems to be a lack in terms of how we continue with disaster recovery or business continuity planning. If we look at COVID, and COVID was an eye-opener, but many organizations started to do, I looked at the US, for example, back after 9/11, started looking at health preparedness and how to really prepare society when in case something does happen, and how do you respond. But you move over to the information info IT side, organizations are definitely facing shortage of skill, limited knowledge in incident response, and most of all, many business continuity plans do not include incident response for different types. How do we respond to a pandemic? How do we respond to a virus? How do we respond to ransomware? And also, what's also missing besides knowledge individual is also an incident command structure. So when something does happen, we don't run around. We focus. And also what's happening, usually companies are most vulnerable when there's an incident and they have to look at secondary type of attack. This is where part of the plan should have been, or similar to, is when you're focusing on incident response, you're actually leaving your core business, your core functionality alone and actually exposed. And this is where sometimes partnership with experts or services that can help add value to your incident response. In the earlier session, we mentioned about governance and cooperation between different islands, different entities, and it makes sense because when an incident happened, for example, every June 1st starts hurricane season in the Caribbean. Although many of them do not hit Trinidad directly, but many of our sister islands happen. But how many of the countries that are in the path actually by January 1st of every year have tested their business continuity, have tested their incident response? So that way, by the time June comes in, you're not running around to figure out, wow, who I'm going to call, where I'm going to go, what I'm going to use, yes, we can use cloud, and that's another topic, but that also exposes organization as well. So really a lack of knowledge in incident response, a lack of incident command structure, I help contribute to many of the breaches that have gone beyond the normal time that they should have, from the time they are exposed to the time they are eradicated.
Right. Thank you for that. It's a lot of information. And we'll come back to a couple of points that you raised. Anthony, what's your perspective on the recent attacks and how they were handled?
Okay, well, thank you very much. Well, the rest of the panel, they touched on, the most important points. What I will say is, every organization needs to have a business continuity plan. You need to understand what is most important to your organization in terms of what are the critical processes. You need to understand how do these processes relate to the goods and services that you offer your customers and your clients, right? So in understanding that, in understanding what those critical processes are, those critical, it could be people. You need to understand the dependencies that these particular services, critical services that you offer, what dependencies, what do these services depend on? It may be a person, it may be a process, it may be a system, it may be the internet. You need to understand that. And in doing so, you would do what we call a business impact assessment. So you need to understand how your business will be impacted by some event. Once you understand that, then you have to now put in place your incident response. The incident response, as the other panelists explained, would determine how fast you respond, how quickly you recover. You need to understand these things. You need to understand also, this is a very critical, issue, and it is psychological, right? In a way, you need to understand how long your organization can go without offering its services and products before it fails. That's a difficult thing to think about. I remember asking, a CEO that question. How long will it take for your business to fail if it gets hit by a cyber attack, and you can't offer your customers your products and services? How long? And that particular CEO had difficulty in answering that question, because every CEO or every business owner wouldn't want to think about something like that. But it is very important for you to think about something like that. How long would it take, so that you would know how much resources you will have to put towards protecting your business. So you would know that, okay, if my business cannot provide products and services for 3 weeks, then you know that an outage must never last longer than 3 weeks. You will have to now put enough resources in place to ensure that you never cross that 3-week period. So that is something that is psychological and very important for everyone to understand, everyone at the C level to understand. For me, looking at an organization and trying to determine, what needs to be done, you have to do a risk assessment to understand that. So risk first, and then everything else. And this entire panel spoke about, techniques, and they spoke about, how to do certain things. All that is wrapped up in a risk assessment. So you understand the risk that's out there, you understand your threat landscape, you understand your vulnerabilities, and then now you would now understand what needs to be put in place, how much to spend, because one of the fundamental principles within cybersecurity is that security is proportional. What that means is you don't spend the same spend on something that is important on something that is not as important. So you spend more money on stuff that would be considered critical versus stuff that would be considered less critical or not critical. So you have to know, that is important, components and important information to know in order to deal with your cybersecurity exposure within your organization.
Thanks for that. Yes, Vincent?
Yeah, let me build on that, because there's some really important points that were hit there, and I want to make sure that the audience is capturing that. So let me put my attacker hat on. Let me put my persistent attacker on. I want to be inside your network and conducting reconnaissance to make sure I understand what your critical processes are. I want to know who your key decision makers are. I want to know what your crown jewels, your data, and the relevance of that data across your enterprise. I want to make sure that I'm going to do my attack in carnival time when people are off having a good time and the key decision makers are not there to react. I want to make sure I can take your network down for an extended period of time because I've gained access to credentials that allows me to control the network. So if you're not putting in place all the things that understand your critical processes, understand your critical crown jewel data, understand who decision makers are and accessibility of decision makers at key times, if you're not doing all of those in your incident response assessment and planning, you're again making yourself extremely rich target for someone who's determined to get after you. So I just wanted to foot stomp a couple of those things because those are critical components that as the C-suite, you ought to be thinking about and putting plans in place to defend.
Absolutely. And I think that opens up doors for many further questions that we can drill down. Before I go to that, I've got a question in the chat, and it's for Ricardo. Sorry, not Ricardo, for Emmanuel at Fortinet. And the question is from Rodney Taylor. He wants to know, from Fortinet's point of view, what are some of the countries in the Caribbean that have been making the most progress on this issue?
In terms of progress in cybersecurity? Well,
correct. Security posture.
So in the Caribbean, if you look at it, let's look at it from the OAS report on the state of cybersecurity in Latin America and Caribbean. Definitely, we've seen the movement in some of our, let's say, we look at, so in my role, I oversee both Spanish and English Caribbean countries. And as you can see from that report, is that there are certain movements that are happening. And the fact that we're having this type of conversation in Trinidad shows that there's an awareness that's happening in Trinidad about cybersecurity. I cannot measure per se or who's on top. Others are further along in progress in their cybersecurity by having their incident response and are capable to respond. And there are those who have partnered with us through memorandum of agreements and so on. And there are those who are seeking partnership with us as well. But what we've seen in the Caribbean overall is a movement toward the awareness of cybersecurity, the need for cybersecurity. And one of the major drivers for that is critical infrastructure, right? Critical infrastructure. And it's a pet peeve of mine. And as we do go through this digital transformation, and we rely more on the technology, the more the threat landscape increases, the more and more we need to look at the risks that are involved and be able to address those risks. So I think some countries are making progress, but they're not there yet. Others are moving forward, but it's really to gauge it. But if anyone's interested to really find out where different countries say it, I would recommend looking at the a report that the Organization of American States usually print every year or so.
Right, and for the audience, I believe Glenn McKnight has put that report in the chat. So if you got access to chat, you'll be able to see that report, or you can email us at TTMAG and we'll send you the link. Thanks for that, Glenn. Now, going back to the earlier question, all of the panelists brought up incident and response, and then, Anthony came up with a more formal approach where he was talking about risk analysis. So I guess you need to do your asset evaluation, have a list of your assets, do your business impact analysis, risk analysis, and then form your incident response. Now, all of that requires experience and skill at a high level to ask the right questions to the right people. The fact that the CEO does not know what their maximum tolerable downtime is because he's probably not aware, so the people around him have not asked him that question or have not told him the answer. How do we deal with the lack of experience and the lack of knowledge, knowing that there is a global shortage which is increasingly getting worse, and there will be a brain drain that's going to happen? And I'll start with Anthony, as you're from the academia, from the ISC squared perspective.
Yes, thank you very much again. Yeah, so that is the current state of affairs. So the demand for cybersecurity resources keep increasing, and that's a natural increase because what is happening within the business world is that we are moving very quickly towards information-driven world. Everything has some information database, or we have IoTs within our environment. We have appliances that are smart. We have smart homes. We're moving towards smart cities. So all our vehicles are moving very quickly to having what we call CPUs or brains, and we have vehicles that can park themselves. So we are moving very, very quickly into a Jetson-like world, right? If I could say so. Everything that we do, everything that we touch, especially our children, will have some computer component or some hardware or some software. And once that happens, or once we move into that direction, we would have a threat landscape that would evolve with the changing times. So because we have these threat actors that we call, so those are the cyber attackers, they will see opportunities in trying to gain access or to get information or to sell information, because these devices and these systems that we now have within our daily world, they all gather information on us. So if they want information on a particular population, they will know where to get that information from. If they want information on you or I, they would know where to get that information. And now that we have appliances and we have vehicles that are smart or smarter, those vehicles and appliances, they will also be gathering information on ourselves. We have smart health devices that there's a ring that you can put on your finger, and that ring will measure and record your state of health, right? So that is your information. And once you have systems like that, they will come with vulnerabilities. There's no perfect system on this planet right now. So they will come with weaknesses, and there are smart people out there who would know how to gain access, unauthorized access to these devices, and gain access to your information. One thing I want people to understand is that we don't value our information as much as we should. Your health information has a lot of value. Your financial information has a lot of value. And you need to understand that these things are valuable, and you need to protect it. So we now, as cybersecurity professionals, we understand what is going to happen with this evolution. We understand that the threat is there, and the threat is growing and evolving every day. So with that, we need to have a counter force. We need to have resources that will counter those threats. And at this current point in time, we don't have enough cybersecurity professionals or cybersecurity experts who can go out there and protect the population, protect governments, protect your information from these cyber threats. What we have to do is to find ways of increasing that resource that we need. So it's like we're training police officers, we're training army. So what we have to do, we have to now find the right resources and train them so that they will now be able to protect the society from these threat agents that are out there. So that is one of my passions, because as the rest of the experts will tell you, that because the resources are not there, then the threat agents will take advantage of that situation. So my passion is to try and help within the Caribbean region, just our small region here, to help build that capacity so that we would have, we may not have enough within the next 5 or 10 years, but to have, a force that is growing that could counter and protect the Caribbean nations and by extension the rest of the world from these cyber threats. And one of the major issues that we have right now is a flight of expertise. So we have our experts, our local experts, our regional experts, and they are moving to greener pastures in more developed economies because they are being courted, and we are, not in the position at this point in time to prevent that from happening. So they move and they go. But what we have to do is try and replace the ones that we have lost with new talents.
Right, thanks. And that's where your work with the ISC Squared Caribbean chapter will hopefully assist in filling some of that.
Yeah.
Ricardo, I'd like to bring you in. How do we deal with the brain drain? I know we can't stop it. It's a global issue. Research shows it's going to continuously get worse for the next decade. What can we do in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, there's several things that come to mind. Obviously, partnerships, counting on organizations that can bring in that help and that knowledge. Consulting firms that understand cybersecurity can actually up level in a short period of time to really do assessment and see how your organization is set up for mitigating against cyber threats. I think obviously the development. I think in one of your questions, it's what can the government do? I think there's a lot of partnerships around education. Usually in the IT field, it's very sexy. Everybody's talking about AI now. Everybody wants to be a data scientist, or there's a lot of interest, and the young folks are going into their marketplace and they're saying, what should I be doing? A lot of them have been told for years, do coding because that's the future. And so they've put all their effort on things that are productive. Obviously, no one's kind of there to do prevention. They don't want to be like security guards. And I think that security is also an enabler. And I think that organizations have to see that differently. When even the security teams in organizations, they're seen as a kind of a necessity that they have to have them. But if you talk about IT spend, they can spend unlimited amounts of money to see how they can build business. But little they know that cybersecurity is actually the enabler, and it's what is going to give them competitive advantage if they have a robust cybersecurity program and that can make them focus on their business, grow their business, because they can do all those efforts. They build all those systems, go to the cloud, do all these really nice and interesting things. But one cyber attack can bring that all down. And organizations that are built on technology, if they get cyber attacked, the confidence is gone. Like when you say, hey, I'm going to be a internet banking organization and you get breached, no one's going to have confidence in that. So how do you mitigate that is by having a robust cybersecurity program. So on the lack of skills that, as you mentioned, it is a global problem in the US. We suffer it as well. I think Anthony touched on a point that even a minimum amount of skills in the cybersecurity, like if you have any basic level of understanding, you can actually move on to another organization, or you actually can promote yourself very quickly into other jobs. And then there's that maintaining that gap of cybersecurity professionals that are mitigating the threats and the events that are happening on a day-to-day basis. So they get a little bit of knowledge. Any analyst is already a manager. They get CISSP, now they get up-leveled and they get double the salary. So we still need those baseline analysts that are doing and looking at the alerts, and obviously a lot of them grow out of that very quickly. So I think getting more young folks exposed to cybersecurity, and the interesting, I mean, there's over 4,000 security vendors. They're also pulling from those resources. I think having strong partnerships with organizations that understand that can give you the continuity, even while you build your own internal security team. But at least you're not held hostage if that security team leaves or that person leaves. You still have someone that's backing you and can provide you the service and establish you for your cybersecurity program.
Right. Thank you for that. And I'd like to now bring in Vincent. Maybe you can add in a flavor from a government or a nation state perspective as well. How do we deal with the skill shortage?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, reminder that we are all a part of the attack surface. And I think Anthony touched on this. Whether it's a smartphone, a smart watch, or some device that is good for you, we're all part of the attack surface. So as a nation state actor, I'm looking for vulnerabilities in any portion of that attack surface, whether that's your email or your watch or your phone. And just to touch on the broader question, we know that there's a global shortage. We know that the Amazons of the world and the Googles of the world are going to consume anybody who knows how to spell cyber. You know, I get lots of calls because they figured out that I know cyber starts with a C rather than an S. And so if you've got anything in your resume that says cyber, you're probably going to get a call at two different levels. One, we've done a very poor job of educating our people and our workforce about how they should conduct business in this domain. So the greatest threat is the insider threat, not because anybody is malicious, but because they just don't know how to best protect themselves in this space. The second failure is we've done a really terrible job of educating our C-suite. One of the reasons we do a terrible job of educating our C-suite is because we talk in technical terms. How do we make it very simple and understandable? And I don't mean this that the folks in the C-suite are not capable, but they generally, the eyes glass over because oh, you guys are so technical and I just don't get it. So the C-suite doesn't know what to ask. They don't know what questions to ask their chief information security officer that gives them the emotional sense that they are protected across their networks, that they've invested the right resources, and they're maintaining a continuous posture. I want to make sure the organization is driven from a cybersecurity standpoint from the top down, investing in the right people, investing in the right resources, asking the right questions, understanding your environment and your vulnerability, mitigating those risks over time, and knowing that the fact that you spent X amount last year does not end the problem. You're probably going to have to continuously invest because as an attacker, I'm continuously coming after you. And I only have to be right once, whereas your defense has to be right all the time. So educating our workforce, building that workforce, cyber workforce capacity, educating our C-suite to ask the right questions, and continuously defending becomes critical going forward. I'll stop there and hopefully that answered the question.
Excellent. Thank you. And Emmanuel, what's your perspective?
Hey, great. No, excellent points. Excellent points all over. So when, again, I guess educating the workforce. So we at Fortinet, just to give you an example, and we are a corporate, social responsible corporation, and we do look at the drain as well. And this is why I chose to hire directly inside Trinidad to make sure that cybersecurity expertise stays in country, and also that their knowledge gets to be disseminated through government, private sector, to different activities that we do within. Actually, yesterday, I spent the week in Trinidad visiting different customers and educating them about cybersecurity, what we do, how can we help them manage the risk, and also what we do. And I know Anthony is the president chapter for IFC Square, and me having a CISSP as well, that we at Fortinet, we decided to our contribution to this dearth of skill set is to train over 1 million individuals in cybersecurity, right? That is our promise to the industry, to train over 1 million. And every year or so, we hold different activities throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. And also, just to give you an idea, we as part of this event, we do a challenge, what's called the Ultimate Fabric Challenge, which is a cybersecurity challenge. And someone from Trinidad did come in third place. So it shows you have the skill set, you have the know-how, you have the knowledge. It's just how to put it into the right mix of things. So as we continue, we're always going to face the challenge with the shortage, but we need everyone to be able to do their part to educate educate the workforce around cybersecurity, and also help avoid the brain drain. And also, I like to hit another point is that Vincent brought up, is that if the CISO is not getting the correct information because he does not understand the techies down there. So imagine what information the CISO is telling the board, right? And it becomes where the board thinks everything is fine until there's an incident or there's an attack, and everybody says, hey, I thought we were protected. I thought we were secure. I thought we had a firewall, and it goes beyond a firewall. Cybersecurity, it's about defense in depth. It's about people, it's about the processes, and it's about technology. And we need to protect the entire domain of cybersecurity.
Absolutely. You don't know what you don't know. And too many people, too many times, people make the mistake thinking that they are secure without the correct knowledge at hand. Okay, we've got another question coming in from the chat, and it's by Dwayne. And he's saying, it appears that incidence of identity theft is low within the Caribbean. As a result, the typical customer is not particularly concerned about data breaches by the Caribbean companies. Could this be an influencing factor to show too slow adoption of cyber defense by Caribbean businesses? So in a nutshell, is it because the public are not punishing organizations like they would in, let's say, in the States or Europe for data breaches? Is that why there is no incentive for the organizations to take cybersecurity more seriously than they're currently doing? And I'll open with Anthony. Jump in.
Thank you very much. So, well, what I can say about this is this. Consumers in the Caribbean tend to be very loyal, right? So culturally, they tend to be loyal to suppliers, especially local suppliers of products and services, as well as so that's one issue. The second issue is that I don't think there's enough awareness on the value of their information. So they may say, "Oh, my government ID information was breached or was stolen by a particular cyber attacker due to a breach that occurred on a business that they they consume from." They would just say, "Okay, well, this happened everywhere, and little old me, nobody really I'm not really very significant, so it's discounted." But I don't think people understand how valuable their information is, right? So that is the second issue there. So the first issue is that we are very forgiving culturally when the businesses that we visit are hacked or something happens, and then two, we don't understand the exact value of our information. So,
right.
So that's why companies they escape. There's no major reputational impact when they get hacked, because we had a couple instances in Trinidad and Tobago, major instances, and based on what we have seen, there was no churn. Everything was business as usual when services got back on stream. In fact, when a particular organization got hit, they were out for at least 10 days, and most people were like, it was a major attack, and a lot of information was stolen. Over 200 gigs of information was stolen, and people were like, the general public, the people who visit this particular establishment were like, why are they taking so long? I want to go and shop. So they weren't cognizant of the fact that their information would have probably been stolen and exposed. So they were more concerned that, hey, we need to shop, so open up your store so that we can come in and spend our money. So
I agree with you. I think that is a problem where too loyal, or I don't know if it's the switching costs are too high, but there is definitely a culture of where people will shout, complain, swear, but they will not transition.
Yes.
Ricardo, what's your perspective working in the region and in Trinidad?
Yeah, so from my perspective, I think obviously there's probably some smaller organizations, the lack of options as well, as you go to say, like, hey, I'm waiting for your store to open. Obviously, the market impact is probably felt less because there is probably a lack of competition. Obviously, if you're in a bigger market and you're a small shop, and probably the smaller organizations get impacted the most. I think not necessarily the lack of awareness on necessarily their own data. I don't think the impact. So in the US, when there's a cyber attack, there are laws that mandate organizations to have to disclose that they've been breached, what has been breached, all those statistics that you started the panel off with. All those are because they had to disclose it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have known of those. And cyber attacks have been going on for years. It's not just, ransomware has shifted a little bit of the conversation because the adversaries know in order for them to get paid, they need to kind of put the threat out there. So they go to Twitter right away and say, I have your data. And they're letting the world know that they have your data. And that makes the press say, hey, let me get that information. That's why you know these incidents. Because if that adversary had not posted that, you probably would have known it. And maybe, they would have said, oh, we have a power outage or we have some sort of other incident. They would have kind of swept that under the carpet and not necessarily expose the information that we know of what happened, that they were actual cyber attacks and cyber threats and ransomware that affected their systems. So I think on that side, the awareness has to come from kind of the pressure and the penalties. The organizations kind of maybe not take the effort of really improving or dramatically improving their cybersecurity posture. I think the awareness from other organizations, though, have increased where it's more top of mind. So just having those several breaches come out to light has pressured other organizations in similar industries to say, hey, wait a minute, I don't want to be that next person on the news. More kind of an ego thing. And obviously they feel that could impact their business. So they're taking steps into really improving their cybersecurity posture. But I think there are some laws that would help kind of improve the awareness and also penalties. GDPR has impacted a lot of organizations on how they handle data. So I think that a lot of organizations didn't necessarily care or adopted ways of managing consumer data, but now because of GDPR and the penalties that come with it, they might kind of reconsider. So I think that's probably what has to happen in these smaller countries and organizations where they have to have kind of that extra push in order to really improve, or else it'll be status quo and they'll continue on as normal.
Right. Thanks for that. And you touched on a point over a question that I want to raise in a bit. So that'll be a good intro to it. Vincent, over to you.
A couple of things touched on already by the panel members, but I'll offer this. Your best firewall is an educated workforce. So while you may not think your identity is important, I want your identity because from your identity, then I can move laterally inside your organization, inside your network. So how do we protect our identity? And how? Oh, by the way, and I see there's a question in the chat about an equivalent to a social security number. Our phone numbers, we don't change our phone numbers very often. And quite frankly, in many cases, if I've got your phone number, that's a pretty good start to understanding your identity and building from there, from your phone number to your email address to your organization, et cetera, et cetera. So protecting our identity, again, it goes back to some of those basic stuff we talked about up front. Good. Don't be lazy with your password. And then the next challenge is, how do we tell the story effectively to make people aware without scaring them so much that they think they can just, we'll get off the net? We're not getting off the net. We're all part of the attack surface. But we've got to tell a better, more compelling story about the risk first, and then the simple, I touched on this again before, best practices that we can all do to protect ourselves and protect our organization. So, the Securities and Exchange Commission is coming out with some language that talks about what publicly traded companies must reveal, when they must reveal it, what they're required to have on the corporate boards, what kind of plans. Those are all really good stuff at the corporate level. And we've got to think our way through, even a small business, small countries. How do you implement those things without scaring the heck out of everybody? We don't want to be the ones crying wolf, but the threat is real. We are, in fact, vulnerable, and we've got to take appropriate measures to protect ourselves and our organizations.
Thank you for that. Emmanuel, I'd like to bring you in. What's your experience when you're talking with the corporates and governments in the region? You feel that they feel that the consumer is not holding them responsible?
Yeah, to some degree, yes. And again, it goes back to educating and how we educate our citizens. And for me, I think looking at the message should be: imagine one day you turn on the lights and the lights don't come on. You turn your water faucet to make that cup of coffee and there's no water. And you're thinking, the night before I turned off the light, it was on, or I had a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. And this morning it's not. Maybe I did not pay my bills. Great. So check to see, okay, yeah, I did pay my bill. I have a receipt that said I paid. Well, hold and behold, there was a cyber attack that took out your electrical grid and your water generating plants. And this is when it becomes a factor. And sometimes until it happens, people do not take it seriously, right? And sometimes even when it does happen, folks still are lax about the preparation. So I think the training and the urgency needs to be, the message needs to change a bit, because again, as Vincent mentioned, we are all part of that digital threat landscape, and we need to understand that. And it impacts not just corporations or servers in the cloud, servers in the data center. It impacts the way we work, we live, we go to school. It impacts our entire lives, and government needs to step up to help ensure that citizens are protected in this environment.
Right. Absolutely. And I think apart from the consumers not holding, let's say, the corporations or the entities responsible, and based on the previous discussion that, the incident response is not in place, I think it leaves us vulnerable when a breach takes place, that the company is sort of forced in a position that they don't have alternatives because they don't have backups, that they may need to pay to get that data back and recover. And then that gives an incentive to attackers to say, okay, look, we know that this region is not prepared, and they'll have no option, and they'll have to pay. And even in the US, we saw the pipeline situation where they had to pay, and the lack of preparation just basically compounds issues, not only for yourself, but everybody else that is in your territory operating. Now, on my next question, I'm going to join it in with a question that has been put in the chat by Anton Constantine, and also based on what Vincent touched on, is that GDPR, data privacy, the European, or known as the Global Privacy Act in some discussions, puts a 10% of your global revenue as a penalty on a company, up to 10%, should they fail to protect your data. And Vincent suggested, or talked about, maybe we need to go down those lines. SEC is possibly looking at putting some more things in place for corporate bodies. Ofcom in the UK. Let me read Anton's question. Anton's question is, what is the role of the service provider in an organization's individual cybersecurity? Are we vulnerable when the service provider has a shutdown? Can we be attacked via loopholes in service provider security? This links in with resiliency panel that took place yesterday when we were talking about the internet service providers, internet exchange, resiliency, and they were talking about threats from natural disasters, but cybersecurity is a major threat for causing downtime. Ofcom recently released the STA, the telecommunication, the TSA, the Telecommunication Security Act, which basically does similar to what GDPR does and places 10% of your global revenue as a possible penalty if a service provider goes down due to a cyber attack, and it's shown that they did not take the necessary precautions. Should we be looking at a similar thing? Now, in Trinidad, I don't know if it's in play or not, but the amendment to the Data Privacy Act does talk about 10% as penalty for companies for data privacy. Should it be expanded to not just data privacy, but downtime, critical infrastructure, electricity, water, banks? And I'll start off with yourself, Emmanuel.
Especially for critical infrastructure. I think that's a key, and I think this is where the message needs to change, and we need to put a bite into it, because at the end of the days, when you look at critical infrastructure and the entire 17 type of industries that fall under the umbrella, and they're a key to a nation's survival in whatever means it is. And we have countries in the Caribbean that are suffering where the entire electrical grid has been out due to ransomware. And when you find out and you go and now you reassess the situation, there were missing controls and lots of missing controls that were compounded, that helped compounded the attack as well. So we need to be vigilant. We need to add a bite to some of these regulations. And this is a belief of mine that definitely the message needs to be changed, and we need to be able to send a strong message to these corporations who will be in charge with certain services that they are providing us. The fact that we are relying more and more on technology. And also imagine, for example, maybe it's not there yet, because eventually we're going to go there, driverless cars and so on. If I'm a service provider and I go down and the car is no longer able to read the telemetry, what happens? Who's responsible? And at somewhere down the road, we got to have accountability. And again, we have to have a bite with the standards and regulations that governments are putting forward.
Right. Thank you for that. Vincent?
I'll just echo, without consequences and without accountability, corporations will probably, and maybe this is too stark, will probably do the minimum. In at least two organizations that I had the opportunity to look at in retrospect, they had assessments that identified their vulnerabilities. They knew what the risks were, and they decided not to invest in mitigating that risk. And so unless governments and institutions apply consequences for failure to act and hold these organizations accountable, they will continue to do only that which is minimal and only that which will generate the revenue margins to keep their business in place. So I'm a strong proponent of holding organizations, corporations accountable with a significant consequence, because they understand loss of revenue when they are compromised. It is more than just a reputational risk. It's an operational and a financial risk, and we ought to hold them accountable.
Right. I mean, we're talking about corporate governance, and that's due care and due diligence, and that's what the board is supposed to be there for. So I guess, whether we need separate legislation or it's already covered by the current board's responsibility is a discussion. Ricardo, over to you. Do you think we need specific legislation to protect against certain attacks?
I do. And I think, and as I mentioned earlier, having kind of the onus on organizations to expose and to really communicate the incidents, as Vincent mentioned. Yeah, they will do the minimum if they're not pressured to. So I think that is a contributor that's helped. I think organizations in the U.S. also be more aware of what their cyber position is. The other thing is like for example, cyber insurance. Cyber insurance was very prevalent in the U.S. I think it's now been expanding, and there's a lot of organizations also in the region that are tapping into cyber insurance and insurance for all business, like business continuity. There's insurance for everything. So if there's a hurricane, you buy the hurricane insurance, flood insurance. So you're mitigating that with, okay, well, even if something happens, I'll be compensated for it. I'll recover any loss that arises from that. And that's similar with cyber insurance. So they buy it as a way of, I don't have to necessarily do anything to protect myself. And if the consequence or something happens, I'll just tap into that. Now, what we've seen from cyber insurance providers is that they are making it much more difficult to tap into those resources. So they're not going to just give you cyber insurance a blank check. Now they're actually, show me your security program. Show me that you have all these mitigating tools in place. So kind of you have to have a baseline of cybersecurity awareness and program established before you even get access to it. So I think that is also impacting and helping kind of level or up level the security posture and awareness of organizations. But I think having the penalties is also key in order to make sure that they actually take the right steps and not just do the minimal viable so they can continue on without really investing in cybersecurity.
Right. Okay. And Anthony, what do you think? You think using the legislative tool set would be the right way for us to go in Trinidad, bearing in mind that some of our critical infrastructure are state companies?
Yes. Ricardo, Vincent, and Emmanuel, they are 100% correct. If organizations are not provided with, something that outlines how they should behave, like a policy, like an act, then they will do the bare minimum. They will, because in order for you to protect what needs to be protected, you have to spend, right? So that means you'll have to reduce bonuses, you'll have to reduce dividends to shareholders and those individuals. So it is very easy to cut security. So I'll just say I'll just make one statement, and the statement is this: compliance drives proper governance. If there isn't any compliance or regulatory requirements, then you will most likely not get proper governance. You would find that organizations will just continue with how things are, normally run by just doing the bare minimum. So we need to have a legislative framework that will provide those legal policies that organizations must follow. And in those policies and those acts, there must be consequences. If there are no consequences and no enforcement, then companies will take the risk and they will do the bare minimum. So everyone on the panel is 100% correct. Consequences are the key to getting organizations to do their due diligence.
Right. Thanks for that. So we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left before we finish this panel. I had a bunch of questions, but I've been taking in the feeds and the interest from the chats. So I want to just go back to my own list of questions, or the closing question. I'd like to give everyone just like 60 minutes to give us, their perspective on what they think is one strategy that would push Trinidad or the Caribbean region forward. What is one thing you think we should focus on in 2023 in terms of cybersecurity? And I'll start with Emmanuel.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you. For me, I think cybersecurity resilience is one thing I think needs to be pushed down. And I'm not just looking at it from Trinidad and Tobago perspective, but the entire Caribbean and probably globally as well. You know, it's about the ability to continuously deliver the intended outcome services despite an adverse cyber attack. The key thing, the board needs to, part of that cybersecurity resilience is the communication. The board needs to understand its role, security managers, CISOs, CIOs, and all that, also their roles, their function, have the capability to be able to take the strategic security objectives and translate that both up and down to the proper individuals. For example, controls, whether we're protecting from a defense in debt, where it involves people, administrative, technical, and so on. We have to look at some of these controls, bring in the baseline, and then work from the baseline and help increase the cybersecurity maturity level of any organization or government to make sure that we all which are part of this threat landscape to be able to function, and in the world that we live in today and the world that we live in tomorrow. Many of the times that there is a disconnect between what the technical folks are doing, because we separate them, even in our terminology. We separate the technical, or I have to have a different language from for the CISO, the technical guy, but there's some point the CISO has an onus as well. It needs to understand what the bottom is trying to say, be able to translate it to the board. And at the end of the day, having a cyber security resilient program that's capable of defending the domain, as Vincent would put it, and ensure that our citizens are not adversely impacted. And if they are, for some reason, it's not a matter of if, but when we do get hit by a cyber attack, but we're able to continue to function despite the hit. So this is the capability to take a hit and survive it and continue to operate. And that's what we're looking for. It's not that it's not a perfect world. As long as we understand the risk, then we know how to go about navigating through the cyber security web.
Thank you. Ricardo, 60 seconds. One thing for 2023.
So 2023, I think the most difficult question to answer for the board or for any organization is, am I secure? And I think having a baseline understanding of what your current status is crucial. So what I would recommend is do a security assessment, get a baseline understanding of what tools and mitigating tools you have in place, how you're going to be able to address any cyber threats. Do you have cyber insurance? So look at the basics of your overall security program and establish your baseline, and then work on improving that. And also, you're not at this alone. So most organizations feel, hey, I'm overwhelmed. I don't tap into the resources that are available to you. So we have Fortinet here on the call. You have Anthony, who's the ISC, so get more resources or recommendations on cybersecurity experts. You have us that provide also consulting services. So leverage the resources that are available, conferences like this that give you exposure and understanding and get up level of information. I think you definitely have to leverage that in 2023. But get your baseline understanding of where you sit today and how you can make improvements to continue your battle forward. So thank you. Thank you also for everybody for today.
Thank you for that, Ricardo. Vincent?
I can't do it in one, but I'll do it in 60 seconds. Number one, your best firewall is an educated workforce. They are the attack vector that I'm going to come after, because I'm going to look at bad behavior for your workforce, not malicious, but just bad techniques. So educated workforce is number one. Number two, we talked about this, have a plan, but it's more than having a plan, it's exercising that plan. And so a lot of organizations have a plan that's sitting on their shelf, but they've never exercised it. So they really still don't know what they're going to do at the time of the event. Number three, share and collaborate. Don't make this point defense, make this cooperative defense. The more that we can share and work together, to solve these challenges, to better our chances, as opposed to one entity. The reason I joined CyberEye as the director in Trinidad is to do all three of those. Make sure we understand our vulnerabilities and mitigate those risks, train and educate the workforce and the corporate bodies, and be able to collaborate across the enterprise. So I think I got that close to 60 seconds, even though, as you did say 60 minutes, which I got really excited earlier, but okay, I'll stop.
I wish. I think we have material to keep going for 60 minutes, but unfortunately, I'm on the clock. So Anthony, 60 seconds, please.
60 seconds, yes, I can do that, right? So from a national level, I think we need to focus on accountability. So I'm talking about accountability from the both public and private sectors. So in order to do that, you need compliance. So we need to have a legislative framework that drives that new behavior of accountability within both the public and private sectors. Once we do that, we would find that there would be a change in culture, and it will help with the awareness within the general public. People will start to become a lot more aware because organizations' behaviors will start to change from the top. So that's it from me. Legislation, a framework that helps with improving accountability across the board.
Right, thank you for that. And I'd like to thank all the members of the panel for giving us a fantastic session. And with that, so in conclusion, we've heard from our panel of experts on the various challenges and trends that are facing Trinidad and Tobago in terms of cybersecurity. It's clear that we're just getting started, that the field is constantly evolving, and it's vital for us as a nation to stay informed and proactive in addressing the risks and threats to our cybersecurity infrastructure. We need to prioritize investing in education and training of our workforce, retaining the top talent, and implementing best practices to mitigate against the risks. I'd like to thank our panelists for their valuable insights and contributions to this important conversation. It's clear that the greatest cybersecurity challenges lie ahead of us, and the past is just a gentle wake-up call. For those who may be interested in a follow-up webinar conference dedicated to cybersecurity, please reach out to us at TTMAG, and if there is sufficient interest, we will consider organizing one.